back to Kitchen Riffin with Chefo Jameso. I'm Chefo Jameso, and today we're making Shishito Romesco. So if you're not familiar, shishito peppers are these kind of bittersweet green peppers that you'll find on a lot of East Asian restaurant menus. And most of them are mild, but about 1 out of every 10 has a lot of heat. Today we're going to be making Romesco, which is this condiment from the east region of Spain called Catalonia, traditionally used for fish, but I think of it as kind of like a hummus pesto mix. It's a lot thicker than hummus. You can see that kind of creamy texture that we're going for. And traditionally, it's used with red bell peppers. But today, since we have shishito peppers, we're going to be using those. So if you don't have shishito peppers, they were just lying around the house, and I wanted to use them for something that was a little bit different than usually just frying them off and popping them in your mouth. I found this recipe that I've modified quite a bit from, I think, Food and Wine magazine. And in that recipe, they use Maracona almonds and parsley. I don't have either of those. So instead, we're going to be using some toasted cashews and arugula. So let's get started. We've got our shishito peppers, which I have already fried off in oil. And I'm going to pop one in my mouth and see if I get one of the hot ones. Sometimes you got to wait a little bit to tell. I think I got one of the mild ones. I like the hot ones. Because of that kind of 1 in 10, chance, it's going to change the dish, So if 3 of these are hot, it's going to be a lot different than if 1 of them were hot or if none of them were hot, right? So you're kind of taking a risk already by doing this recipe. But in with our peppers. I think that's 13 of them, if you take out the one that I ate. But I'd say somewhere between 10 and 15 of them sounds good, depending on the size. We're just going to throw that into a food processor along with everything else. So our cashews, our arugula, I've chopped this finely and packed it into about a cup. And if you don't have arugula or parsley as the original recipe calls for, you can use really any green. It's going to affect the taste for sure. I used cilantro when I made this one. And you can use spinach, you can use any sort of green that you have lying around, as long as you've got a lot of it. We're also adding garlic, which wasn't in the original recipe, but I love garlic and I think it kind of goes well with the pepper. And lastly, the original recipe does call for lemon zest and lemon juice. I took the zest off of this one, failing at a dessert recipe yesterday, so we're just going to do the juice. And I'm doing this with the lemon, cupping it in my hand just to catch the seeds from falling. We're also going to put a few breadcrumbs in here. I forget how much the recipe calls for. I'm just going to sprinkle in maybe a few tablespoons. And that just gives it a little bit more texture. And then lastly, another thing the recipe didn't call for is some honey. That just kind of brightens up the mixture. You're not going to taste that sweetness like you would expect maybe in honey, but I think it really helps balance what's already kind of a bitter Romesco. And then lastly, salt always to taste, but I'm going to start with about a half a teaspoon and a little bit of cracked black. So get that off of there and start mixing. So as you can see, pretty quickly, it gets up against the side of that. So you're going to have to take this off and give it a little wipe down, just like pretty much any time I'm using a food processor. So like I said, if you don't have shishito peppers, you can use red bell pepper is typically what you use romesco for. So just, you can use everything that's in here and just replace it with red bell peppers or any pepper. Usually it works best with something a little mild. So you don't want to go, unless you're insane, you don't want to go with a jalapeno or a serrano or something like that, unless you just absolutely love heat. So we're just going to give that another pulse before we go in with our final ingredient, which is going to be the olive oil. And the olive oil is going to help kind of bring everything together. This recipe calls for a half a cup. If you want to measure it, if you're more comfortable doing that, then do it. I have found that I like just kind of using the oil, adding it slowly, and getting it to a consistency that I like. And so that's what I'd recommend you do. So I'm going to give that one more spatula against the side so that we know we're getting everything in there. And you can see that texture, it's a little thicker than I want it. It's going to be thick, it's going to hold its form, but I'm going to put a little bit more olive oil in there. I think I only got about a tablespoon or two out in there. Back on. So now, see, it's a little bit creamier. I like that consistency. And that's where I think we're still not quite to a quarter cup of oil, or a half a cup rather. But I think we've got it to a consistency that I like. If you typically like your dips a little runnier, you can keep going with the oil. I think I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm just going to take this blade out, give it one more mix, and then I'm going to check for salt, pepper, and then maybe a little bit more honey if I feel like it. So under that blade is where a lot of that oil and lemon juice and a lot of those things you're mixing into it really kind of stick. And so you're going to make sure you get that right around the middle. So I am going to give this a little taste, see what else it needs. I don't really think it needs anything. You're getting a lot of that richness from the cashews, a little bit of sweetness from the honey. So it doesn't need a ton of salt. I also think I didn't get any, or not many, of the hot ones, which actually in this case made for a better romesco, in my opinion. So it's a quick dish, and we're already done with it. Just put it maybe in a nice little bowl. You could spread this on toast. You could eat it with veggies. You could really do anything with it. It's such a versatile condiment. It's called a sauce sometimes, but you can see it's way thicker than what we typically consider a sauce. But another one that you can riff on, add whatever nuts you want. If you've got some hazelnuts, if you've got almonds, if you've got pecans even, they're all going to give you a really different flavor. But I think you can't really go wrong either way. So that is Chefo Jameso's Shishito Romesco.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, that's really good.